Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We're co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Our guest today is Charles Blow, a distinguished and outspoken columnist for the New York Times.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at FFRF.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Welcome to Freethought Matters. How does a poor boy scavenging for scraps in a Louisiana city dump go on to become a leading national columnist and commentator? Receiving FFRF's Emperor Has No Clothes Award at FFRF's recent annual convention was Charles M. Blow, our distinguished guest today. His columns have appeared in the New York Times since 2008. Those columns tackle hot-button issues such as social justice, racial equality, LGBTQ plus rights, mental health, and national politics. He's an MSNBC political analyst and has been the anchor of Prime with Charles Blow on the Black News Channel.
Charles Blow is author of the New York Times best-selling books, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, a memoir, and The Devil You Know. Fire Shut Up in My Bones was developed into an opera, the first by a Black composer to premiere at the Metropolitan Opera. The Devil You Know has been developed into a feature-length documentary, South to Black Power, that will air later this year on HBO. And Charles, I am a huge fan of your column. I have been reading it devoutly since it first began, so it's a very special pleasure for me to welcome you to Freethought Matters.
Thank you for having me.
So I was surprised in reading your bio that you actually started at the New York Times back in the 1990s as its graphic editor, and you received an award for information graphics coverage of 9/11. How did you move from graphics to opinion writing?
First, I guess I have to start by saying the more interesting move was moving from writing to doing information graphics in the first place, because I was an English major in college, and then I became a journalism major. It just happened that in our journalism program, you had to pick a concentration, and this is not advice for any college kid listening to this, but my thinking was, I thought at the time I was going on to law school, and I thought, I will choose visual communications because I'm not going to do it anyway, and I can get all A's, keep my scholarship, and go to all the parties. So it was very much, it was a kid thinking about kind of ideas. But I kind of drifted into doing information graphics, and I just said, well, I'm here, I'm going to do it as best as it can be done. And I thought that we did a really amazing job at the New York Times, and they do even better now in that department. And after years of doing this, 14 years, I'd left the Times to become the art director of National Geographic magazine, and the Times wanted me to come back, and they asked me what I wanted to do. And I thought this would be a way to, they were doing op charts at the time. I could do op charts on their opinion page, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And they made me a columnist because they thought the title that I gave, which was op chartist, was too weird. So they said, we're just going to call you a columnist. And I said, what? Because I was not a professional writer. We would write captions and things for illustrations and data illustrations and charts and maps and whatever. but I was not a writer. But I was a thinker, and they recognized that part of me and took a chance to see if I could learn to write it. But it was one of the most strange on-the-job training assignments in all of journalism. Who starts on-the-job training as a New York Times columnist? I had to develop the muscle or remember the muscle from when I used to write in college. You know, the when I was an English major, when I was fascinated by language, that fascination with the language had not disappeared.
Well, good writing is, as you say, good thinking, and we're all the beneficiaries of that decision by the Times. You received the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Emperor Has No Clothes Award, and you've often been asked your views on religion, and you once tweeted this. You said, "Religion is a way of relieving anxiety and enforcing man-made morality." How did you go from living in a very religious culture to these current views?
As a teenager, I was more religious than anyone who I knew. And, you know, I prayed all the time. And I remember once I was in a basketball game and, we were down by a point or something and the other team shooting free throw. And I'm praying. My eyes were closed. They shouldn't be because I could get the rebound. My eyes are closed. The ball lands right in front of me. Open my eyes, and I just think I'm praying not about winning, just be humble, da da da. And I close my eyes halfway down, and I just kind of let whatever happen, and I scored a point. But I was that religious of a kid, praying all the time, and I thought that I was being called to preach, and I was like, that's a no-go. And in that moment, when me saying I'm out, it was everything kind of calmed down, and I was no longer that religious. And I felt lost in that, by the way, because it had been such a part of my life. But it wasn't until much later in my life that I came to see or came to believe that religion in the formal sense of the word just wasn't something that I could believe. And part of that was also working at National Geographic. And when you're touching fossils, like the idea that the world is 10,000 years old, it doesn't make sense anymore. Like it doesn't make any sense. And also when you are looking at the infinite stretches of the universe, that's part of the job, is understanding this and understanding, explaining to people, kind of microscopic machinations. All of the simplistic kind of understandings of the world from religious texts starts to look a bit silly. I do say I don't begrudge anybody who is a religious person, because I can actually understand how we use that as a mechanism for coping. Sometimes it helps people not to fall into despair. I often say that I understand why enslaved people would have been religious people. Like you need it. The brain cannot process that much terror. So you need something to escape. But I understand it now as an escape that the humans needed magic and the brain created magic.
You write about all those church services when you were growing up, and reading your memoir, it reminded me of James Baldwin writing about his church experiences and the fervor and all of that. Can you tell the very funny story about your baptism?
In the Baptist church in the part of Louisiana I'm from, the children would come forward to give their lives over to God and be baptized very early. And so I must have been, 7, 8 years old or so. And they were having the altar call, and I went down to do it. And everyone started to clap, and the guy touched me on my shoulder and turned me around to the crowd. He goes, do you believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior? All the things. And I was saying yes to all the things. And then he said, and do you want to be baptized? And this man was like really big. And I had seen him baptize people. It looked like he was going to drown me. So I said, I don't know about that. And my mother just like slumped her head, and everybody in the church starts to cackle with laughter. And I just go walk back to my seat because I'm like, it may be funny, but I will not drown in this church.
But then when you were actually baptized, you put up a fuss, right? You
I still thought I was going to be drowned. Waited till that man left as a preacher. We got a smaller preacher. So I did it again. But by this point, I'm like, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 years old. So I'm the oldest person getting baptized that Sunday. And so I go last and I'm prepared. I can't swim, but I'm prepared. I'm going to hold my breath. And he puts me into the pool. He says what he's going to say. And he dunks me. And it felt like he held me for like a second or two too long. And I said, I can't breathe. My brain is like, I can't breathe. And I just start to fight to get out of the pool. And he doesn't understand what's going on. So he holds a little bit longer. And then, so it's a self-reinforcing fear happening. And by the time I get up out of the pool, I realize I have splashed half of the water out of the pool into the choir stands. The choir is scurrying to either side. And again, everyone in the church is falling over with laughter, and my mother has her head hung.
Well, a good sense of self-preservation, Charles. In your home, like many others in Louisiana, your Black home, your family had a picture of a white Jesus. How did that affect your thinking and your self-image?
I don't think you are aware of all of the white supremacist visual coding that you are surrounded by. So in the moment, it just seemed like that is what he looked like, because the very same image that we had, other families had, and even the churches had. So we just assumed that that Jesus was a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes. It wasn't until later that when you open a book and you read and you realize there's no way that this Middle Eastern man was blonde with blue eyes. Like, there's no way. And the description in the Bible also don't suggest that that's the way he looked. And you understand what the kind of colonization of imagery has done throughout the world, particularly in Western societies, around capturing imagery and transforming it to make it appear more Western, more white. And that's just unfortunate because it's a brainwashing. And that is a problem that is consistent, that in American Christianity and Western Christianity, which is to kind of weaponize Christianity. Creating that image of Jesus is a weaponizing of Christianity. It is, not too much of a step from, the slave Bibles, which took out, vast portions of the Bible because they refer to things like freedom. And they only kept the parts that referred to enslavement or had made no hint of freedom. And that just tells you they didn't even believe their own religious text. They were just weaponizing the religious text.
You write in your memoir that after your faith cooled, once the curtain had been pulled back, the wizard as you knew him could never be real again. And that's a great line. And I wonder if you could talk also about, you've written about, you are the B in the LGBTQ, growing
Yes.
up different in this very poor environment in Louisiana. How did you survive?
Well, I think people, including children, are very adaptive, and the human instinct is towards preservation. So you do everything you can to survive. The great tragedy is that not everyone does survive, that there's a lot of people, children who grow up different, who simply cannot handle it, and who have not only ideations of suicide, but actually commit suicide. The rates of suicide, ideation, and actual suicides is much higher among people who are queer identified than they are among the general population. And that's because a lot of people just can't deal with the pressure and the isolation and the bullying that comes along with it. I happen to be one of the lucky ones who did survive, although I had my own suicidal ideations and came right up to the brink of committing suicide, as many others have done. Um, so I think you're just doing everything you can to live, and that is a strange sentence to have to say, because we think of living as just an automatic thing. Like you wake up, you're alive. You go to sleep, you're alive, and living itself does not seem to be the challenge. The challenge for most people is thriving or being happy or successful. For many queer kids, it is just fighting to be alive.
We have to take a break. We're talking with New York Times columnist and FFRF's newest Emperor Has No Clothes awardee, Charles Blow.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Christian nationalists are mobilizing. They want to turn America into a Christian theocracy. Our secular democracy is in danger. All personal liberties are in jeopardy. Vote like your rights depend on it. And join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, an association of atheists and agnostics working to keep religion and government separate.
We as a country are at a fraught moment in our history. Not only are we continuing to fight to establish and maintain a true separation of church and state, a phrase that itself, as you know, does not appear in the Constitution, but a concept that is enshrined in the Establishment Clause, which is the opening line of the First Amendment. We are also now having to fight the rise of Christian nationalism, a pernicious idea that is spreading in part because it is misunderstood and unrecognizable to many Americans, even the ones who practice it. A survey published in October by the Pew Research Center found that most American adults had never heard anything about Christian nationalism, and almost 1 in 10 had heard a little, at least, about it, but didn't know enough to form an opinion. One survey respondent described Christian nationalism as patriotic Christians who believe in God, family, country, morality, and kindness. And I suspect that many people think of Christian nationalism as just some patriotic, mostly white people who go to church, akin to the definition of white nationalism that Senator Tommy Tuberville expressed, saying last summer on CNN, my opinion of white nationalists, if somebody wants to call them a white nationalist, to me, it's an American. He would later, of course, have to admit that they were white nationalists were racist.
That is an excerpt from Charles Blow's recent Emperor Has No Clothes Award at the FFRF's 2024 Annual National Convention. And we're continuing our conversation with Charles Blow, the New York Times columnist and author of the memoir, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and the book, The Devil You Know.
Charles, let's turn to some current issues. You grew up in Louisiana. What do you think about the state of Louisiana passing a law to post the Ten Commandments in all public school classrooms?
Listen, I believe in secular governments, and I believe that the founders of this country, whatever their beliefs may have been, also wanted a secular government. And that is what the Constitution strives for. Whether or not this particular court is striving for the same thing, that's up for debate. But any incursion is problematic, particularly when it is mandated. I don't want to see government crossing the line in any way into religion. I believe it is a dangerous thing. And it's also, in a pluralistic society, discriminatory in its own right and exclusionary. In a pluralistic society where there are multiple religions, for the government to say that one has primacy is also a problem.
As I told you, I loved reading your memoir. It's beautifully written. You were
Thank
so
you.
poor that you were scavenging at the city dump, and you got out of Louisiana, but your second book, The Devil You Know, a Black Power Manifesto, encourages African Americans whose family left the South to consider returning to the South. Why do you say that?
At the end of the Civil War, 3 Southern states were majority Black. And 3 more were within 8 percentage points of being majority Black. And so that meant that there was tremendous amount of state power that Black people held after they were given the right to vote with the Reconstruction Amendments. That is real power, because the power in the country is divided between 2 groups, 2 entities, the federal government and the states. There's a reason that we call it the United States of America, because the states have a tremendous amount of sway, particularly over things that African Americans care a lot about. And the only reason that Black people lost those majorities was because of terror, to a certain degree, being terrorized out of those rights to vote, because white people in the South were afraid of what they called Black domination. I believe that, one of the few things that I agree with George Bush on is that you can't allow the terrorists to win. This idea that Black people would have been scared out of state power or driven out of it by terrorists is unconscionable to me. And in addition to that, I believe that the only way for Black people to have a real shot at equity, and if Black people have a shot at equity, then society has a shot at equity. I don't want anybody to be disadvantaged. I want the leveling of the ground for opportunity. That is the America that I want to live in. I have not seen any movement towards true equality that is sustainable, that does not run through white people's sympathies, does not run through other people saying, yes, I will agree in this moment to give you this shot of equality, or in this moment I will rescind it. That can't be the way that Black people exist in the country.
So Charles, we'd like to do a quick lightning round with you, if that's okay. And I'm going to throw out some issues, and I'd like to start with Project 2025.
I don't know how lightning, I'll say scary. Is that how lightning fast? One word, or do I need to say more than that?
Scary, okay. How about the Mississippi IVF case?
A huge mistake politically for Republicans, because it's backfiring across the country, this idea of cracking down on women to that degree.
Christian nationalism.
Incredibly dangerous and creeping, and being successful in part because people don't understand what it is.
That's true. The importance of voting.
Paramount. It is not moving at the pace of a social media where you can have immediate impacts right away or be heard right away. But this is the most important thing that we do as citizens of the United States.
Hear, hear. One of my favorite columns of yours has the title, Women Will Save Us. What do you mean by that, and how will women save us?
Women are voting, more in the lane of people who are trying to protect rights and expand those rights than men are. And that has been happening for decades. And it is on the back of those women that society will be saved if it is saved. When we look at efforts to dismantle government or efforts to, towards kind of authoritarianism, women tend to, the majority of them, vote against those efforts. And so it is women, it appears, who are going to lead us in the saving of the country if it is to be saved.
In your memoir, I think the hero of your story, at least in your youth, was your mother. Under very dire circumstances, under poverty, and in fact, she took a gun shot at your father once. She was smart, she was industrious, she held things together, she taught you how to plant and grow. So women are, of course, a big part of your life and in your life story. At the end of your book, you write that you grew up being different. You saw yourself as different, and society saw you as different for many different reasons. Is that why so many of your columns are aimed at trying to aim for equality and justice for people who are perceived as being different?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I think the most successful writing, whether it's column writing or not, is when we write about that which we know best. So I write about poor people because I know poverty. I write about queer people because I know what it feels like to be queer. I write about equality because I know what it looks like when people do not have access to that equality. So I write about the things that are most dear to me, that I understand best, because I believe that in writing about those things, you bring the most passion, and you can feel that passion through the page.
Well, keep writing, Charles Blow, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.